Every few weeks, Jo would shut herself up into her room, put on her scribbling suit, and fall into a vortex, as she expressed it, writing away at her novel with all her heart and soul, for till that was finished, she could find no peace.
Well, hello, and welcome back to my Stitch and Addiction YouTube channel. It's been almost 2 years since I last published a Becoming Jo March video, and I'm super excited to be getting back into the Becoming Jo March project. In the last video, we discussed chapters 8 through 14 of Little Women. And if you haven't seen the previous 2 videos, feel free to go to my Little Women playlist, and there you will be able to find both of them. We discussed chapters 1 through 7 in the first video and chapters 8 through 14 in the second video. Today, I'm going to be doing the outfit reveal for chapters 8 through 14, as well as discussing chapter 15 of Little Women. In the part 2 video, we discussed how chapters 8 through 14 reinforced Jo's character traits that we had already discussed. Her sense of taking action whenever something's going on, her passion and her deep feelings, whether it be anger or love or compassion or empathy. We also discussed how chapters 8 through 14 reveal Jo's ambitions and how ambitious she is, especially for a girl of her time period, and how most of those ambitions focus on a literary career. And so today's outfit is part of that ambition. This is Jo's scribbling suit. Now, her scribbling suit is not actually described until chapter 27 of the book. However, chapters 8 through 14 discuss her writing quite a bit, specifically chapter 8 and chapter 14. Chapter 8 talks about Amy burning Jo's book that she was so proud of and the family was proud of. And chapter 14 talks about her sneaking off to go try to get her first story published. So I felt like it was very appropriate to reveal this outfit for this section of chapters. Now, there's a lot that happens in chapters 8 through 14. There's a lot of adventures that Jo has during that time period, and there's several outfits mentioned that have really intrigued me for many years. Originally, if you remember from my part 2 video, I was going to create her ice skating suit, which was just going to include a quilted petticoat with this dress that I'm wearing. And I was going to create her scribbling suit for this set of chapters. However, as I did more research and reread that part of the book over and over again, I realized that I wasn't completely happy with just doing those 2 things for chapters 8 through 14. First off, ice skating became a very popular activity throughout the Victorian era. Many women used it as a chance to show off specific ice skating ensembles and fashions. Now, as I mentioned in the last video, Prior Attire has done an ice skating ensemble and has a video about that on her channel. But considering Jo's characterization, as well as the financial status of the March family, I don't feel that it's accurate to say that Jo March would have worn one of those fashionable ice skating ensembles just to go ice skating on nearby pond with Lori. So I've done a lot more deep diving into all of this, and I have a really cool ice skating outfit that I'm going to be debuting in a future video. Hopefully it will be coming out right after Christmas. I'm super excited about the photo shoot I have planned for this, and I think that you will love it too. So if you're interested in seeing that, definitely subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you're notified when that video comes out. There's also another outfit mentioned in chapter 12 that I would really like to recreate for Jo. It is her scarlet and gray boating suit. I also did not get that done for this video. I decided to focus on one outfit for this video, and both of those outfits will come out in 2 other videos as nice little additions to this section of the book. So in the book, The scribbling suit is actually described very specifically. And as I showed you in the last video, I was going to make it out of a black worsted wool, which is what I've done. I have a black worsted wool for the cap with a little bit of lace trimming right here, as well as the red bow that it discusses in the book. And then it called the other part of her scribbling suit a pinafore. So I did a lot of research on that because whenever I was researching pinafores for the 1860s, I kept coming up with girls' fashions. And at this point in the book, Jo is 15, and so I was like, is she still wearing a girl's pinafore at this age? What I found was that there was no specific time when a girl switched from a pinafore to an apron. And there is, from my research, a distinct difference in the patterning and style of a girl's pinafore versus a woman's apron. So that's why I wanted to be careful to make sure I was making the right thing for Jo. All I can figure is because Jo was reluctant to enter into womanhood, and we know that from several different things that she says in the book, she was still just wearing a girl's pinafore. Also, if you look at girls' pinafores versus women's aprons of the period, especially a pinafore pattern like this one, it actually covers more of the dress, this specific type of pinafore. There are some pinafores that were fancier that didn't cover as much of the dress, but this is a pinafore that I found from Godey's Ladies Magazine for a girl, and I designed the pattern myself based off of the illustration and realized this is probably the closest to what Jo would have worn because it did cover her dress so well. And as it mentions in the book, she liked to be able to wipe her pen on the skirt of the pinafore. And so I'm thinking the whole purpose of her wearing the pinafore was to keep her dress from getting too covered in ink when she was writing. Because as we know, she always had a lot of ink on her fingers when she was writing. So I'm assuming, like me when I'm cooking, she was not very neat. After I did my research on the pinafore and determined the style of pinafore to make for Jo's scribbling suit, I dived into research for the cap that it is said that she is wearing. I have found it a little bit difficult to find patterning and description details on utilitarian caps of the 1860s. There's plenty of nice frilly ones out there, but finding a more simple one that would have used, for example, when Louisa was a nurse, which was a project that I did last year, or when Jo was scribbling, is a little bit more difficult task. I finally settled on this pattern that's shown in Peterson's magazine. I simplified it just a little bit because I felt it was a little bit too frilly for Jo, but it essentially is a circle for the main body of the cap with a band around the outside and some lace trimming. We also know that hers had a bow, so of course I added the bow. The cap shown in Peterson's has strings, I guess, to tie it underneath your chin, but I didn't feel like Jo would want the strings bothering her, so I left the strings off. I also used inspiration from one of the illustrations from an early edition of Little Women. I did not use the very first edition of Little Women, which was illustrated by Louisa's own sister, May Alcott. That version shows a little bit more of what we consider a Scrooge cap, and my friend Laura Ingalls Gunn, you can check out her channel and her video, replicated that cap as Jo's scribbling cap. I went with just a little bit later edition from the 1870s, and it shows a cap very similar to the one that I'm wearing and very similar to the one shown in Peterson's. I feel like the early illustrations are the most accurate because these illustrators would have lived through that era of fashion, and so they would have been familiar with who would have worn what. For our book discussion today, we're going to be reading chapter 15 of Little Women. Now, I'm not going to read the chapter to you. I would highly recommend that you have already read it before you watch this part of the video. So if you haven't read it, I would love for you to stop the video and read chapter 15 before you come back to hear my thoughts on it, because I don't want to spoil it for you, especially if you've never read it before. But we're going to discuss chapter 15, and then we're going to talk about the next outfit that I will be making in Project Becoming Jo March, which actually should be coming out before the end of this month. So I'm super excited to bring to you at least 2 new outfits in the month of December. Chapter 15 occurs in November, right before Jo's 16th birthday. This is a chapter where they get the telegram that tells the news of father's injury as a chaplain in the Civil War. And after A few moments of initial emotion and panic, the girls and Marmee begin to rally and come up with a plan in order to take care of father, take care of everything at home, and of course, Lori, Mr. Lawrence, Mr. Brooke, Hannah, and even Aunt March all play a part in helping to take care of all these things that suddenly have to be taken care of as a result of this telegram. In this chapter, we see many of the character traits we've already discussed about Jo reinforced. We see her need to take action whenever there's any kind of situation on hand. So, for example, Marmee asks for some paper, and Jo literally just takes some of her writing that she's just written, tears off the backside of it, and gives it to Marmee to write out her telegram. She doesn't even care about her writing at that point. So, once again, this reinforces the idea that Jo will immediately take action whenever action needs to be taken. We also see this when she goes to ask for the money from Aunt March, and instead of asking for the money from Aunt March, she goes and gets all of her hair cut off so that she can have $25 to help pay for the train ticket to send Marmee to see father. Once again, her passion, her deep emotions, whether it's love, compassion, anger, comes into play here because she's willing to sacrifice her own hair, her one beauty, as she cries about later in the chapter, in order to make things happen for her family. And this is one of the things that you see repeatedly in Jo throughout the book. So her character traits of a deep, passionate nature, as well as her need to take action, are reinforced in this chapter. Which leads us to the question, what would Jo have worn in this chapter? Once again, remember I'm sticking with the colors red and blue as the primary colors in her wardrobe. And I discussed that in the first video, if you're curious why I'm using those colors. So this outfit will once again be using the colors red and blue. We know from things that Jo has said repeatedly throughout the book, things already discussed in previous videos, that Jo will do anything for father and the Union Army to support them. She has even wanted to run off to be a drummer in the army or work as a nurse. She knits socks for the men in the army. So Jo is very willing to do anything it takes to support the cause of the Union Army, and specifically her father, as we see by the sacrifice of her hair in this chapter. That leads me to believe that Jo would have worn some sort of military fashion. Military fashions became very popular during the 1860s in America because of the Civil War. And so women's clothing would show influence of men's uniforms because they were showing their patriotism and their support by copying those elements into their own fashion. So what specifically would Jo's military fashion have looked like? We must also remember that the March family was not well-to-do. They had fallen on hard times. So Jo doesn't have a lot of money to work with. Plus, their sense of clothing was different than our sense of clothing. They would use what they had as opposed to making up something completely new. If you remember in part 2 of this series, I mentioned how I made this blue plaid dress in 2 pieces. The bodice is separate from the skirt. That was not necessarily normal for girls' dresses of that time. Women's dresses were usually in 2 pieces, but not necessarily girls. However, I did this because I planned to use the skirt for this next outfit that I'm about to discuss. Although Jo's dress might not originally have been made in 2 pieces, as she outgrew it, the skirt could have been cut off and made into a new skirt. This was very common. Another common thing they would do with their skirts was when the bottom of the skirt got too worn, they would take it off the waistband, completely flip it, and then they would have a new hem with a nice new edge, and the worn edge would get caught up in the seam at the waistline. So this reuse of clothing was very, very common during this time period. In addition to remaking or re-wearing the skirt from this outfit, I believe Jo would have worn a red Garibaldi blouse. The Garibaldi blouse began with an Italian patriot named Giuseppe Garibaldi. And he wore this red blouse or shirt when he was fighting. This red shirt got incorporated into American fashion when the Italian Guard in the Union Army made up of a group of immigrants from New York, wore these red shirts. Of course, as I mentioned before, the women, eager to show their patriotism and their support of the cause, then incorporated these red shirts into their wardrobe. Originally, they would have been called a Garibaldi shirtwaist, and that eventually became the Victorian shirtwaist, and then morphed into what we know as a woman's blouse today. In addition to wearing a skirt with a Garibaldi blouse, I think that Jo would have worn a bolero style jacket. Now, in the 1860s, you can see these called two different things. In Godey's, they're often called Spanish jackets, but they're also called zouave jackets. In my research, I could not find where the Spanish jacket term originated from, other than the fact that the jacket came from Spain and was somehow incorporated into American military fashion. The history of the zouave jacket, however, can be traced. The term zouave actually comes from the French zouaves. These were military units that were used when colonizing Algeria. However, the French did not come up with the original zouave uniform. When the French were colonizing Algeria, they were impressed with the Berbers' fighting prowess, and they appropriated the design of their military uniforms to emulate their strength and power in their fighting. The Zouaves were legendary for their abilities as fighters, and so it was only natural that other military units, when in war, would copy over this design in hopes that, I guess, it would transfer that power and that victory in fighting. As a result of the Zouaves and the Zouave units being so highly regarded and distinctive in their uniform, once again, that was another style detail that the women copied into their fashion to show their patriotism and their support of the cause. Now, I've actually made this three-piece ensemble before: the Garibaldi shirtwaist, the skirt, and the Spanish or Zouave jacket. I've made it several different times, both for clients and for modeling, as you can see. But I've never actually made one for myself. And the original plan when I discovered this design was to make one for myself. So I'm super excited to finally be diving in and making the one for myself. And as I said, hopefully I will be revealing it to you in just another week. I'm going to make the shirtwaist out of a red cotton lawn. They were also often made out of red flannel, but as I've mentioned before, this is Texas and I want something that is cooler. Women's shirtwaists were also often made out of extremely lightweight and almost sheer fabrics, if you look back at photos and research, and so I think this is fitting for the shirtwaists that were made at the time. The jacket will be made of a navy wool, and I'm going to just be trimming it very simply. Spanish or Zouave jackets can be trimmed in an extremely complicated style that included lots of soutache and hand stitching, and I've done some similar to that before. But this one I'm going to do fairly simple, modeled after this fashion plate right here, with just the strips of red to add a little bit of pop to it. I think that that goes along with Jo's style. I don't think that she was overly ornamental in her looks, especially in her younger years. I think she would have had a simpler look. Whether you are new to my channel and this series, or you've been around, I hope that you will join me on this project by reading along. If you are unsure as to the reading schedule, here it is once again. As I've mentioned, I am adding in some outfits in some of these chapters, so some of these chapter sections will have more than one outfit to them in the end, just because I cannot help myself and I love Jo March and 1860 fashion so much. There is so much to create. I also regularly post this graphic on Instagram, even on my community tab here. So if you're ever looking for it, hopefully you can find it in one of those places. Whether you agree or disagree with my analysis of today's reading and clothing, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. So please leave them down below. If you have enjoyed today's video, I hope that you will like, share, and subscribe. You can also follow me on Instagram, where I more regularly post updates about this project, post photos of the finished dresses and videos of the finished dresses in action, as well as give dates about reading and upcoming videos and all of that fun stuff. I hope that you will check out my previous videos and tutorials. I have a tutorial series that shows how to make Joe's undergarments. So if that's something you're interested in doing, definitely check that. And thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.